Our federal government may be getting ready to require natural gas-fired power plants to install technology to capture carbon emissions. The Biden regime is looking to enact new rules that the left claims will help decarbonize the power sector in 12 years. According to reports, the Environmental Protection Agency is expected to release new standards for new and existing power plants. Biden is looking to replace both Trump's American Clean Energy Rule and Obama's Clean Power Plan sometime this week. But power plants aren't the only thing Biden's socialist agenda is now targeting. The Biden regime is also looking to force electric cars on the American people. An EPA proposal would cut cars and trucks' greenhouse gas pollution in half, they say, by 2032. In addition to that, last week the White House stated it's hoping that 50% of all new vehicles being sold in the United States will be EV cars by 2030. Some say if Biden succeeds at all of this, global emissions would only be lowered by 0.18%. Yeah, way less than 1%. So is it all worth it? Joining us now is the senior fellow for the Center of Renewing America and a former double assistant attorney general at the DOJ, Mr. Jeff Clark. Jeff, thanks for being here.
Always good to be here, Emerald, and thanks. This is a very important topic for your viewers to understand. Look, the Clean Air Act has a basic division between, in Title I, they regulate stationary sources, and in Title II, mobile sources, basically cars, trucks, get regulated. And so in a 1-2 punch fashion, first we have this electric vehicle rule coming out under the mobile source side of the act, which is going to mandate that in order to satisfy the standards, there'd have to be 70% battery electric vehicle penetration by model year 2032, which is something that starts in model year 2031, depending on the manufacturer. So at the moment, it's only 7%. So to go from 7% to 70%, that's a 900% increase in about 8 to 9 years. That's just extraordinary. And I don't think that there is actually the capacity to build all of those batteries. And even if they could be built, there's not the capacity on the electrical grid to support them. And how are people going to afford these vehicles? How are people going to find charging stations without waiting for an hour when you have that many electric vehicles on the road, to get them charged in a timely way? Or are they going to have to, put in charging stations essentially in their home? And not everybody lives in a single family home. It's a nightmare of infrastructure shortage upon infrastructure shortage that they're going to inflict on the American people in the name of this climate cult. And it's really being driven by an agenda coming from the World Economic Forum to have net zero. And so if you're going to try to do net zero, you have to do really radical things, hence this electric vehicle rule. And then, as you mentioned, on the stationary source side, ever since the Obama administration's Clean Power Plan, they've been radically trying to restructure that sector. What they did there was called generation shifting. They tried to shift the generation of power from coal to an intermediate natural gas and then ultimately to all renewables. And just last year, the Supreme Court struck that down and said that was something they did not have a clear enough authorization from Congress to do. So what they're going to launch this week by the news accounts is another try at that. They're going to see if they can find a way around that Supreme Court decision, which is called West Virginia versus EPA. And, it's hard to judge what the details are of that until we see the proposed rule put out in the Federal Register.
So it sounds to me like you're saying they're going to have to do some real legal gymnastics to even issue this rule. And then let me ask you, will there be legal challenges to it that could hold it up?
Absolutely, Emerald. The Clean Power Plan actually was stayed by the Supreme Court when Justice Scalia was still on the court. It never went into effect. Then we came in the Trump administration. We replaced it with the Affordable Clean Energy Rule, the ACE rule. The D.C. Circuit, a day before Joe Biden was inaugurated by majority vote, 2-1, struck down the ACE rule. And then that created an issue of, well, is there no rule in place now, or does it default back to the Clean Power Plan? And the issue went before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decided in the West Virginia versus EPA case that the case was not moot. And then, they went on to invalidate the Clean Power Plan. So, it's really kind of back to square zero for them in trying to regulate greenhouse gas emissions from existing power plants. We'll see what they try to do, but they are going to have to go through gymnastics to do that. But they did give themselves, at least what they're going to argue, is a leg up by embedding a whole bunch of provisions that I don't think got a lot of notice in the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. It's called the Inflation Reduction Act, but for some reason it has billions of dollars of climate change nonsense built into it, as if that's going to help reduce as opposed to increase inflation. They're going to argue that the new authorities they got in the Inflation Reduction Act from Biden and the last Congress give them the power to do what the Supreme Court said just last term they couldn't do.
Let me ask you, with the Republican majority, is there anything that they could do legislatively to try to address this and block a move like this new rule?
They could try to get, appropriations riders passed through both houses that would restrict the use of funding to finalize the rule. But to do that, they'd have to, muster all the necessary votes in the House, a majority, and then they'd also have to get the Senate to go along with that. So that might be difficult. So I think that the courts are going to be where the action is on this. And the other element of the stationary source power plant rule that I should mention that the press is reporting that, that they've at least allowed to leak out is going to be an element, is they're basically going to set the standards so stringently that in order to comply, there would have to be carbon capture and sequestration, which is a technology at this point that really is not proven at a large scale, not economically feasible. And so I think that problem with the rule is going to put it right back in the same kind of box that saw the Clean Power Plan struck down last term by the Supreme Court. Namely, they don't have authorization to impose something like carbon sequestration and capture, and they're not doing it directly. They're doing it by trying to make the numbers and the standards so stringent that it forces that. But I think, the Supreme Court's shown that it can pierce through that kind of obfuscation and get to the heart of the matter and then, decide that, look, if we're really going to have this kind of radical change, it should be Congress voting for it after consulting with the American people about whether they really want it. And I don't think they want these radical power plant rules, and I don't think they want, 70% electric vehicles within 8 or 9 years either, Emerald.
Yeah, and all that just for 1.8, or not even 1.8%, but 0.18% is all you gain. Thank you so much, Jeff Clark. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Emerald. Thanks a lot.